Hello, Alan here. I am going to talk about the Great Western Schism, when there was papal claimants in both Rome and Avignon, France, two parallel lines of popes, both claiming to be the true pope. Um, and a lot of people, a lot of Protestants and Eastern Orthodox, copying this argument from the Protestants, use this to try to discredit the papacy. And they're like, no one knew back then, and really no one knows now why the Roman line was authentic. It's just kind of an arbitrary patch up work after the fact. No one knew at the time, and both of them had equally good claims. We're going to blow that out of the water today, looking at 14th century sources when this actually happened. Okay. Now, I'm going to present the argument, I'm going to pick an opponent of the papacy. It's an Eastern Orthodox apologist. Again, he just gave this argument from Protestants. And I apologize in advance. This YouTuber, his behavior is quite insufferable and condescending during this video. So just bear with me. He's going to make the argument, and then we're going to respond to it.
If there were ever confusing and lengthy periods in history where it was unclear who the true pope was, wouldn't all of these shallow polemics immediately lose all of their potency? So, the million-dollar question: did any such confusion ever exist? Boy, did it ever. I mentioned it in passing previously, but have you ever heard of the Avignon papacy and the Western Schism, by chance? No, no, no. Not the Protestant Reformation. That was just
We all know the difference between the Western Schism and the Protestant Reformation.
another massive schism that the Roman Church gave birth to, which completely destroyed the Christian landscape in the West over the course of the last 500 years. No big. Well,
Really? How about the East in Russia, where only 1% of the people attended the Christmas liturgy last January? I mean, you guys didn't even need a Reformation to destroy the Christian landscape.
allow me to provide you with a brief overview. The papacy actually resided in Avignon, France for a period of about 67 years in the 14th century. Yes, you're hearing that correctly. The Bishop of Rome vacated St. Peter's in Italy and was stationed in Avignon, France, with no intention at the time of ever going back.
Oh, by the way, it's kind of there's kind of a two quoque here, because from 1204 to 1261, the Patriarch of Constantinople wasn't in Constantinople. It was in Nicaea. In Nicaea, not in Constantinople. The Crusaders were in Constantinople. They elected their own patriarch, who the Greek chronicler Nicetas Cognatus refers to as the Patriarch of Constantinople, not the Latin patriarch, not a pretender. So I mean, yeah, there's some tu quoque here, which if this guy knew his sources better, he would be more careful about using these arguments. But let's continue.
You have to understand, Rome at that time was kind of like not the place you'd want to live, to put it nicely. 7 successive popes from that point onward ultimately made and kept their home in Avignon. Eventually, a French-born pope, Gregory XI, decided to move the papal court back to Rome, and he died shortly thereafter. The Italian laity took their opportunity to seize the papacy back for good, storming
The laity. Yeah, now it's true that there was an angry, violent mob outside. That's true, and he's going to give some details, and we're going to give all the
Conclave and allegedly stabbed a bunch of swords and pitchforks up through the floor where the next pope was being chosen. The message was clear: choose an Italian pope or else. Predictably, an Italian pope was chosen, Urban VI, and he kept the papacy in Rome. At that point, a bunch of French cardinals made their way back to Avignon and claimed that their decision was made under duress and therefore it was illegitimate.
Remember this argument. This is the key argument. It's pretty much the only argument they have. We're going to see when they claimed it was under duress.
I mean, seems reasonable if true, right?
Not true.
So they got together and elected their own pope. You guessed it, a French pope. Thus began the period of 40 years where two successive lineages of popes
See, this is the argument.
simultaneously existed in two separate countries, with each one replacing their pope with a new pope after a death. It gets crazier. Eventually, a third pope was elected elsewhere in an attempt to resolve this whole
Yeah,
fiasco.
but no one
But the
accepted.
plan failed
Yeah.
and just compounded the issue by creating a situation where there are now three simultaneous papal claimants. Ultimately, it took a council, the Council of Constance.
Why is he making a big deal about councils? We are, see, something about Eastern Orthodox. They try to say, well, you're the Church of the Pope, we're the Church of the Councils. No, we are the Church of the Councils. We've done more church-wide councils. We call them ecumenical. You may dispute that. That's a whole argument. But church-wide councils than the Orthodox Church has since the schism. We've done way more of those. I mean, so we're the Church of the Councils. We're continuing the tradition of councils. In fact, when we had the Catholics and Orthodox had a council together, Council of Florence, we're the only one who kept that council. We are the Church of the Councils, not you guys.
To settle the question and elect yet another pope, Martin V. While historians like to paint this as a nice, neat, and tidy end to the whole embarrassing situation, in reality, the Avignon lineage of papal claimants actually continued on for 20 more years after
Yeah, but they had like 0 followers.
the fact.
Oh, I guess we're done. I can't remember. I can't remember where I cut the thing off there. So he's presented the argument, right? He's presented the Protestant argument against the papacy. All right. We're going to use this chronicle, Jean Froissart. He's a 14th century chronicler. He dies in 1405. He's a great source for the first half of the 100 Years' War. If you like studying the 100 Years' War, like I do, this guy's a great source. Cheap book too, published by Penguin. $21 Canadian, which is, I don't know, $15, $16 American. It's not that expensive either way. And he has 10 pages in here on the events of the Conclave of 1374 and the things that led to the two popes and all that stuff. Those 10 pages are worth the cost of the book alone. So I would recommend buying this book, Jean Froissart Chronicles. All right, now we're going to open with page 204 is where we're going to start. And let me just get my page 204. So there's the angry, violent mob outside, and Froissart writes, and they finally elect a pope. And it says, Froissart writes, after this election, the Cardinal of Geneva. Pause for a second. Cardinal of Geneva. Remember that name. Remember this guy, the Cardinal of Geneva. He's going to come up again, and it's going to be quite ironic. Remember what he does here. Okay. After this election, the Cardinal of Geneva put his head out of one of the windows of the conclave hall and called to the crowds, calm yourself now, you have a Roman Pope, Bartholomew of the Eagles, Archbishop of Bari. The people shouted back all together, he's all right for us. The Archbishop was not in Rome on that day. I believe he was in Naples. He was quickly sent for and came to Rome, delighted at the news, and presented himself to the cardinals. They gave him a great reception, and he was taken and raised up among them and invested with all the rights of the papacy, taking the name of Urban VI. The Romans were extremely pleased by this name because of good Pope Urban V, who had held them in great affection. His creation was announced in all the churches of Christendom, also to the emperors, kings, dukes, and counts. The cardinals wrote to their friends that they now had a properly elected pope, words which some of them later regretted having used so emphatically. The new pope revoked all dispensations granted previously. Clergy of all ranks accordingly left their homes for Rome to obtain new ones. Okay, so everything seems fine. They properly elect the pope. They use the word properly. They all admitted that it was properly elected. But something happened and another pope comes on the picture. So we have Pope Urban. Now Clement is going to come on the scene. All right, let's go. This is from the same book, page 205. Not long after Urban VI had been made pope, a number of cardinals decided to come together at a favorable opportunity and elect another, because this pope was doing no good to them or the church, being too arbitrary and capricious. When he discovered that he was great and powerful and saw various Christian kings writing to him to declare their allegiance, he grew presumptuous and began to act violently and willfully, removing certain of their rights from the cardinals, contrary to the customary practice. They were greatly offended, and discussing it amongst themselves, they concluded that he would never act in their interests and was unworthy to hold sway. Several then proposed to elect a different pope who would be both wise and powerful and rule the church well. So basically, um, a number of cardinals don't like what the pope is doing, so they plan to elect a new pope. Wait a minute. Nothing there about being under duress in the conclave that elected Urban VI. They just don't like what the Pope is doing. So it continues. The cardinals put a great deal of work into this plan, particularly the one who was later made Pope. They were a whole summer debating it inconclusively. For those who favored a new election dared not act openly for fear of the Romans. So they're working secretly to have this scheme to elect a new pope. I continue. During the vacation of the court of a number of cardinals left Rome to forget their cares in various places of their choice. Urban went to Tivoli and remained there for some time during the vacation, which could not be extended for too long because a large number of clergy from different parts of the world were in Rome waiting for dispensations, of which many had been promised and approved. Those cardinals who were in agreement met together to institute a pope. Their choice fell on Robert of Geneva, who had first been the Bishop of Rouen, then Bishop of Cambrai, and was known as the Cardinal of Geneva. So the same guy who had announced that Urban VI was a pope has now been elected pope in this secret scheme conclave. Nothing to do with them being under duress. Kind of funny. It continues. After this election, at which the majority of the cardinals were present, he took the name of Clement. At this time, a very gallant knight from Brittany called Sylvester Bude was in the neighborhood of Rome with 2,000 Bretons under his command. They had all fought very bravely in previous years against the Florentines, whom Pope Gregory had excommunicated and made war upon because of their rebellion. Sylvester Bude had done so well that they had surrendered unconditionally. Pope Clement and the cardinals who supported him now sent secretly for him and his men. So the people who secretly have this scheme to elect a false pope, of which there is no duress, are now getting military support involved. And the first one to always get the military support involved, that's always sketchy. Think Henry IV in the 11th century. They came into the Vatican quarter and established themselves in the castle of San Angelo outside of Rome to coerce the Romans from there. Urban did not dare to leave Tivoli, neither did the cardinals who supported him. There were not many of these who fear of the Bretons. These were in considerable strength and were all violent men who overthrew everything they came up against. Okay. So there you have it. You have a secret plan. There's no mention of duress yet. No mention of duress. They just don't like what he was doing. So they elected a new pope. It says the majority of cardinals, but still, if they had already elected a pope, it doesn't matter if all the cardinals were there. As long as this pope's alive and in Rome, validly elected, which he was, no duress was there. No duress. Now it continues talking about the King of France, how he decided to follow Clement, and it talks about all the monarchs in Europe, how this monarch followed Clement, this monarch followed Urban for this or that reason, and then eventually, to make an argument in favor of the legitimacy of Clement, Pope Clement has an idea. It was then, this is page 207, it was then that Pope Clement dispatched the Cardinal of Poitiers, a shrewd, worthy, and learned cleric, to inform and extort the people of France, Hainaut, Flanders, and Brabant. He had taken part in the first election and was able to explain how they had been forced to choose the Archbishop of Bari as Pope. The King of France and his brothers and the prelates received him favorably and listened readily to his arguments. They felt they were good. They felt they were very sound and placed great reliance on them. So basically, now the whole under duress thing comes out. Long after the fact, they didn't elect Clement because they had been under duress. Under duress. No. They elected Clement because they realized that they elected Clement because they didn't like what the current pope was doing, which is not duress. That's not a valid reason. Like if I'm going to give a hypothetical example, but I'm going to give one more quote from Froissart. This is page 208. In this way, the Christian kingdoms were at variance over the two popes, and the churches were also divided. The greater number were for Urban, but the richest in terms of revenue gave their full allegiance to Clement. All right. So basically what happened, the cardinals elect Pope Urban. They claim now, and then some cardinals don't like what he's doing, so they secretly plot to elect a new pope, and then eventually Pope Clement gets a cardinal to make an argument that they were all under duress. So and so that's not a valid argument. It was not under duress. That was a bad attempt to salvage Clement's papacy after the fact. Say hypothetically, in the 2013 conclave that elected Pope Francis, a few months after, the French cardinals are like, we don't like what Pope Clement was, or not Pope Clement, what Pope Francis is doing. Let's go elect our own Pope and move to Avignon. Is that a valid line? And Francois Hollande, who is the president of France, and says everyone in France is to follow the new Pope that the French cardinals elected in opposition to Pope Francis. Does that make him, and say a few more countries decide to follow him, does that make them a valid Pope? No. It makes them an anti-Pope. There was no duress in 1378. That was an excuse after the fact to try to save a line of anti-popes, anti-Pope Clement and his successors. All right, so I hope you learned something. Remember, go pick up Froissart's Chronicles, great 14th century source, and have a good day and God bless.